to ruin my night. And I just knew it from the music in your voice. You were poison, and I had no choice.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with vintage pop, swing, and jazz singer. He's also a composer and lyricist, Steven Taetz. He talked at length about his latest 2018 CD, Drink It In. It's a great beverage. Over the years, he has performed at Carnegie Hall, the Rogers Center in Toronto, and many other establishments. As a lyricist and composer, he has written for many internationally renowned artists. Steve is a very busy and talented cat with a bright future ahead of him, and he has stories. So please get to know this Toronto cat and dig this interview, my friends.
Steven, thank you for taking a minute for Neon Jazz, man. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be chatting with you today.
So your picture on your website of you drinking that martini is the perfect epitome of Drink It In. I think that kind of captures things. So I'm going to start off here and ask you, how do you feel about this album?
We're so excited about the album. It's coming out this Friday, and it's been about a year in the making, and it has a lot of fun material, both standards that folks will know, and also some originals that fall in the same vein. So we're super thrilled to have it coming out.
So your realm is vintage pop, swing, and jazz. How did all of this kind of start for you in your childhood in Canada? Kind of give me a picture of your childhood, where you grew up, and how all this music started for you.
Sure thing. I was born in Alberta, which, for U.S. listeners, just in case you're not sure, that's just above Montana. I was born there and then grew up part of my childhood in California. While I was young, my mom would really lean in hard on standards, and I wasn't sure where these things were coming from. She would sing A Bushel and a Peck and just really fun show tunes that I thought she was making up sometimes because the lyrics were so fun. And it just became so ingrained in what we were listening to as kids. Ella Fitzgerald, Sinatra, the classics from the 60s. When I started studying music, I was really entranced by her taking voice lessons while I was taking piano lessons with the same teacher. And I thought, well, I need to get into that kind of singing thing also. So around grade 2-3, I started voice lessons, and my voice teachers were nice enough to let me play both in classical music and jazz as I went through both grade school and university. As I came out of university, wasn't sure which direction I should go in, both to make ends meet and also to follow my heart. So I was working mostly in adult contemporary, touring for my university to get my feet wet, to recruit other students, and then moved out to Toronto and really fell in with the right kind of crowd that were both involved in pop and later in jazz. So I've come back more over the last 5 years back to my roots with that adult contempo swing vintage jazz sound. And now we're really excited to put out the first album that has that kind of sound as well.
Talk to me about your education, about mentors you have, good advice that's kind of fueled your career.
My voice teacher that I studied with in university had studied in Indiana with some really stellar folks who had trained conductors like Toscanini and Von Karajan, and she had a classical tradition to her teaching, but that kind of technique has really helped as I've studied both classical and jazz. So being able to know the right kind of breath support, the kind of background to jazz composition and things like that has really given an interesting training. And then moving out to Toronto, falling in with a lot of the folks. The producer on my album is a teacher at one of our really well-known school of jazz here, Humber, at the University of Toronto. And so learning, studying, co-writing with him, Drew Dureka, has really given a crash course in some fun ways of looking at jazz in a unique way, and traditional pop in a unique way as well.
you've performed at Carnegie Hall. You performed at a lot of places, not only around Canada but in the United States. Is stage home for you? Do you get nervous going into a Carnegie Hall? Has it always been natural for you to hop on stage? Talk to me a little bit about that mentality.
The stage, I would feel the most comfortable on stage is actually public speaking. I'm more comfortable chatting with you, but yesterday I was on the local TV station pitching the album, and that public speaking is, as most people can probably relate, is the most painful part of it. I would much sooner sing for the interview than chat about myself. Yeah, I think getting on stage at an early age kind of takes that away, that fear away, because, you know, the hours of rehearsal, those 10,000 hours starting early, just make it a place to have fun and explore and be creative, and what's better than that? I mean, just being able to do something new every time you're up on stage, especially performing jazz.
So you have another side to you. You have a performer side to you, and then you also have this side as a lyricist and a composer. You've written for many international artists. And I want to ask you this. What do you feel more comfortable with, or is it kind of a yin and yang that works well together that makes you who you are as an artist?
Well, I think with jazz, it's a unique genre where, unlike pop, top 40 today, if you put out a song that someone else has written for a different artist, it doesn't ring as true. Like most artists today on like who could we talk about? Well, Lady Gaga's a brilliant songwriter in her own right, but many artists these days don't write their own material. So I've had a lot of fun collaborating, both co-writing with artists on their own material and co-writing with other songwriters for other folks. So one example, I was writing with I was writing for a Brazilian artist with some local songwriters, and trying to get into the artist's head to write something that one would feel they would be thinking about can be a little bit forced or create a strange dynamic if you're not there with the artist directly. So I find it's actually quite fun to be able to write both for myself and for other collaborators, so that, you know, we're creating a new songbook, hopefully contributing to the American Songbook of new material. So this is a living, breathing a repertoire. I, of course, love standards, so pulling in half and half in my own sets, it's fun to have songs that people know and can enjoy and relate to automatically, but also, you know, it's like I've heard if you want someone to learn how to eat their greens as a kid, you want to include some croutons or something tasty along with that to get them interested in eating their salad or greens. So it's a good way in the door.
Yeah,
to mix metaphors.
Sure, mixed greens. So yeah, it makes sense. Let me ask you this. You know, one of the things that teaches us, you know, one thing is being on stage, one thing's being in the classroom, but one of those other big measuring sticks for us, and I'm sure as a musician, is seeing other people perform live. Who have you seen perform live that's left a real big impact on you?
In the last year, I can think of two people that have stood out, and I'm sure folks listening can relate to, if they've not seen them live, in hearing them as well on recordings. But most recently, Cécile McLaurin-Salvant was here for the Toronto Jazz Festival, and I'd loved hearing her recordings and checking out videos, but being in the room with someone who is both so young and so accomplished at the same time, and having hearing standards that are less well known being performed in a way that just sets that bar so high. So anytime I'm going to hear that song from now on, I think Cécile McLaurin-Salvant is the one that sang that the best. So these moments where she was on stage performing, the audience, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was just transfixed on what she was doing, because that control, that technique, that was at a level that is so excellent, but secondary only to her storytelling and ability to bring in the listeners. And the other artist that I heard last year in New York at the Jazz Congress, or she was there for Winter Jazz, was Jasmia Horn. And again, taking the listener on a journey, she performed each of the songs from her first album and just exemplified the excellence of a singer, where being so young but in control of her instrument, being in control of what message she wanted to relay. She sang this medley of Summertime and another couple songs, and in the same medley had people clapping and people crying and people just jumping out of their seats, thrilled. And as we were leaving the auditorium, you know, she's this now international superstar, and but still took time to just greet everyone and say how excited she was to be there. So that was two really special experiences.
Right on. So let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
I love jazz because as an artist, to be able to sing the same song but in a different way each time is just a lovely blank canvas that's there, both for me to enjoy and for listeners to take part in. It's different in every room, it's different in every city, and it has a different message each time we can perform the material in a new way. And it just, unlike a formulaic performance, and I don't want to denigrate classical music, but we're encouraged to perform it differently, and it's expected that there's something new each time, and I think that's such a special thing.
You're releasing an album, your career is on the move, and there's a lot going on, not only in Canada, but in the United States. So my question to you is this. It's almost rhetorical, but I like to kind of get the temperature of what's going on. How well is jazz doing in the world in 2018?
I'm so excited to see artists becoming well-known in the mainstream. You know, Canada has a really great reputation for mainstream pop jazz artists, Diana Krall, Michael Bublé, some maybe lesser known, but Holly Cole, Matt Dusk. And I'm super excited to just see that kind of success from artists where jazz is being reinvigorated by international leaders. And there's some artists that are crossing over into mainstream, whereas before in the 60s, 70s, 80s, folks who were performing jazz and swing were a little bit more well-known or in the mainstream. So I'm really excited to see folks taking it in new ways and also getting a little bit more prominently known for their take on jazz. I'm excited to be able to also give my own input into that and creating some new material. I think there's not a lot of male vocalists in jazz that are creating material. I'd love to see more of that, to see more collaboration with other artists and to make something new, new messages for the audience.
Let me ask you this. Everyone has a version of who you are, the perception of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
That's a great question. What's interesting for what I feel I bring to the table is someone who has a unique voice. So I'm not a Sinatra, and I'm not a Chet Baker. I have my own vocal tone, and I feel like I'm bringing a different sound to what swing and jazz was. And I think I'm a creator and a songwriter in a way that's unique, trying to blend some old pop like Cole Porter, some new pop like you might hear on the radio, and meet somewhere in the middle. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I'm still learning who I am also. Like, this is one of, I released an album in 2013 that had more of a roots singer-songwriter approach to things. It didn't ring as true for me as an artist, I found, and with audiences. So I found in seeing some of the stations like yours and in Mexico and Luxembourg and some stations pick it up, I find that being more true to my roots of jazz has made me realize, oh, that's the direction I should be going in. So I'm still learning, and I'm excited to see where it goes also.
Perfect. I like that. That's a perfect way to wrap everything up. Steven, thank you for taking some time out. Good luck with the new album, and hopefully at some point we'll see you swing through Kansas City.
Thanks, Joe. I'd love that. Thanks for your time. All the best to the listeners.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in Toronto, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Steven for his time, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, all the time, the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
You fill the glass, dear, and I'll drink you in.
Neon Jazz.